for yourself, same pattern. Alarmist predictions, you know, the drought was permanent. Rains would never again fill our dams. Islands would drown from this global warming. Sydney would drown from this global warming unless we destroyed even more of our coal-fired power stations, like the ones we blew up in South Australia. Coal-fired power stations, the source of our cheapest, the most reliable electricity. Well, I hardly need to tell you the climate disasters did not happen, but unfortunately another disaster did. Electricity became much more expensive and much less reliable, which has left the Morrison government with a huge headache. If, and I mean if, coal is so wicked, and if journalists and activists are so determined it should go and will attack anyone who says different, and if banks are now too scared as a result to fund coal projects, everyone running a million miles from them, how on earth can we keep this country powering? How? 21st century economy, how do you do that? The Morrison government now has released their discussion paper on its preferred options. It says let's go with more gas and that hugely expensive battery, thanks to Malcolm Turnbull, pumped hydro scheme, snowy scheme. Let's also look at carbon capture projects and hydrogen as a fuel, anything. All that until renewables like solar and wind become cheaper and can be backed up when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. And naturally, of course, the forces of unreason have condemned this plan.
Well, the Liberals have released a roadmap towards destruction. If the options in this roadmap are taken up, we will not limit global warming to less than 2 degrees, as set out in the Paris Agreement. It's a recipe for climate crisis.
And of course, the Greens are nuts. Absolutely ignorant, willfully ignorant of the science. There is no climate crisis. And the Green solutions to this non-crisis would not work anyway.
The cheapest way at the moment is to build new renewables because the fuel from them is free.
Just notice the two flags behind Adam Bant, neither of them the Australian flag. Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, no Australian flag. Listen, Adam, yes, the fuel is free, but the technology is not. Solar panels cost. They're almost all made in China. They're made with a lot of coal and they wear out, need replacing. And you need a lot more transmission wires to get them from here to there. And worse, what do we use for power when there's no sun or wind? It costs a bomb to back that up. The cost of backup power is big, and of the backup batteries is even massive. But once again, the climate extremists on the ABC today just do not get that.
We're trying to get to zero emissions. You've conceded that, or acknowledged that rather. So gas is not a long-term option. Why don't we just back the winners, which are the low-cost and zero emissions technology of solar, wind and pumped hydro? Why don't we just back a winner?
Having to deal with that mindless zealotry is the Energy Minister, Angus Taylor. I talked to the poor bloke a short while ago. Angus Taylor, thank you so much indeed for your time. How do you cope when you deal with that level of ignorance combined with a sort of religious conviction, and on the national broadcaster too? Does it surprise you?
Well, Andrew, we've just got to keep going back to the facts. That's the crucial thing here. And the facts are that Australians don't want taxes on their energy. They don't want to pay more for the cost of energy. They want to know that when they flick the switch, the lights come on. And that means when the sun goes down, you've got to have more than just solar. You've got to have a mix in your energy system. And as long as we stay focused on the facts, I'm very confident that we'll continue to win out and get the right outcomes. We are winning. We're seeing energy prices coming down in this country, both electricity and gas. We're seeing the gas markets being opened up, including in Victoria, which is good progress. We've got a lot more to do, and we've got to make sure that we focus on technology, not taxes, when we think about energy policy. Andrew, that's absolutely crucial.
I noticed you heroically resisted the temptation to have a free swing at the religious zealots at the ABC, but I'll move on. I'll do that work myself then. How fragile are our power supplies now? You've got Victoria's giant Hazelwood coal-fired power station closed 3 years ago. Power prices went through the roof as a result. Now you've got the big Liddell generator in New South Wales due to shut in 3 years' time. That will create yet a similar crisis, I should imagine. What are you going to do about Liddell?
Well, we've said to AGL, it's very clear, life extension or replacement.
Yeah, but what are they saying back to you?
Well, I think they understand the problem we had in Victoria, and I don't think they want to be responsible for a repeat of that. So we're working through that now. There's a task force that is in motion. It's well advanced, that work, and we'll have more to say about it in the near future. But the principles are absolutely unambiguous. Will
you pay them to stay open?
Well, I mean, I don't think the government should have to pay anyone who is an electricity generator and retailer to keep the lights on. That's their job. I mean, that's what they need to be doing. But the important point here is that we need to have enough baseload power in the system to keep our aluminium smelters going, to keep the lights on, keep small businesses in business. And we've made very clear to AGL we expect that. Look, we've put legislation through the Parliament in recent times, which was controversial but was important. The big stick legislation was all about saying to the energy companies, we expect you to do the right thing. We're seeing prices coming down now. They have an obligation under that legislation to pass those price reductions through.
That's so, you know, well, but they've got to make money. They've got to make a profit. You can't force them to run what they say is uneconomic. So I don't know. But you mentioned the aluminium smelters. Of course, there have been warnings that they're going to be closing. The one in Portland, for instance, in Victoria, and others as well, because the power just isn't as reliable and as cheap as they need. Why is a standard coal-fired power station not part of your plans? They're very cheap, very reliable. They've done the job for Australia for decades. Why is that not part of your plans?
Well, coal is part of our plans. I mean, coal will continue
new
for
ones,
many years.
New standard coal-fired power
absolutely.
station.
Well, we're doing a feasibility study on a coal-fired power station in Collinsville in Queensland now, so let's see how that plays out. We absolutely are. But I mean, the Victorian government will not approve a coal-fired power station. Of that, I can be absolutely confident. Look, we've had trouble getting the Victorian government to approve opening up gas. The good news is, in recent times, they have started down that path, which is great. But we need more dispatchable power in Victoria, just as we do in every other state.
Well, Victoria became a powerhouse when the state government opened up coal-fired power stations in the Latrobe Valley. You might have to do something like that. That's one day. Again, cost-benefit, right? All this move to green power, like getting rid of coal-fired power stations and letting them, not replacing the conventional ones, your pumped hydro scheme, the various subsidies on green power, the solar and the wind, all that kind of stuff is meant to cut world temperatures. If we do your plan with the emissions targets you've got, by how much will we lower the expected temperature of the world by, say, 2100, end of the century? If I say, and let me just hazard a guess, it'll be by 1/1000th of 1 degree by the end of the century, am I roughly in the ballpark?
Well, we're 1.3% of global emissions, so that speaks for itself in terms of Australia's role. I mean, any impact that's going to be felt will be from the globe, not from Australia on a standalone basis. But the important point I'd make is that we're focused now on technology, not taxes. And what that means...
No, I got that. Those
Angus
subsidies... Taylor, I have
those
got
subsidies...
That. This is my question, and you must know it's coming because I've asked that of every minister and every Prime Minister who's got green schemes. I need to know the benefit for all these billions that we're being asked to pay and the higher power bills and all that kind of stuff. What's the gain? How much will the world's temperature fall as a consequence of your plan?
Of Australia's actions, we're 1.3% of emissions. So that, as I say...
I know that. I know everyone knows that.
The point I'm making...
is the fall in the temperature? See, no one tells me. No one
because of Australia's... Well, Australia is 1.3% of emissions. So whichever way you look at it, acting unilaterally makes very, very little difference. That's very clear. Correct. The chief scientist made this point. The chief scientist made this point. But the broader point I would make, though, Andrew, is that we have made it very clear that those subsidies that you've seen traditionally on solar and wind need to come off. Energy technologies need to stand on their own 2 feet. People talk about electric vehicles. It's great. If people want to buy an electric vehicle, go your hardest. Absolutely fine. But this should be driven.
If they need to stand on their own 2 feet, how about putting the solar, your solar battery, your Snowy Point 2 out in the market, see if anyone buys that lemon. I bet you they won't. That's billions that we're in the hock for. But I won't pursue you on that. The whole point is all this for next to no difference to the temperature. But I guess they're the times we live in. Angus Taylor, thank you so much. At least we're getting those subsidies off.
Good on you. Righto. Thanks, Andrew.
Good on you, mate.